And then I did ask Darian if you could talk. I think that what you're doing with Sarah is such an interesting model. Is you got a grant and now you're getting an expert to come in and teach you on site, which is awesome.
Yeah, so for a few years now, I've been writing grants to get to hire local professionals to come in and do training for our staff, which has been working out pretty great. Um, I've done it a few times now to bring in a conservator and some archivists, and we've been working with collections and trying to get things a little more under wraps. I mean, we're not a museum or cultural center, just well, maybe a cultural center, but we have some work to do still before we get like exhibits and a proper storage facility. But before that happens, we're working on cataloging, doing assessments and condition reporting and all that kind of work. So I've been working with the CMF grant to bring in like some professionals just here in the local area. Um, I've also worked with the NEH grants. They have a couple that we've used to bring in local professionals also, and it's been really successful for our work here.
Yeah, I think it's a
Yeah.
really wonderful model of, being able to learn on site with your own collections and having someone there to help you along the way. And they come in like every a couple of days a week or once a week or something like that.
Um, yeah, sometimes it varies. Sometimes we'll try to knock things out within a couple of weeks. You know, it's a certain amount of hours, or like 2 days a week for like 6 months.
Mhm.
Something along those lines also works really well.
Okay.
Um, yeah, it's been pretty great so far. So instead of having to send, I've noticed a lot of people don't want to travel outside of Alaska for training. So it's nice to have resources here in the state that we can tap for help.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
just think it's such an interesting, different model to take, and I wanted people to know about that as well. So thank you.
yeah, great.
It looks like Angie Lynn might not be able to make it, so I'll talk to her later about Museum of the North and her museum studies classes up there at the university. Um, but is there any questions for anyone who is currently on the call?
I don't have a question, but there is something that that might be worth thinking about if you're someone looking at internships or opportunities. You know, the Heritage Center, and I know that Angie, Dema isn't here today, right, talking about that, but you know, we're talking about doing some like kind of a partnership, right? So they have interns, who are year round and who are paid employees, right? But, there might be an opportunity for them to also do a Smithsonian internship in a way that is like supporting tribal museum kind of partnerships, so thinking about AIPA and a cultural center, right? Maybe there's ways that like Smithsonian with their resources and like to have a short-term internship while somebody is working at AIPA. I think that there's ways in order to, like what Darren was saying about the training opportunities and bringing people in, because there's a lot of people that don't want to leave Alaska, myself included when I was young, right? So I think that it's like there's ways to kind of to get the training that you need through programs that like a larger sort of Smithsonian program on top of the job that you already have, whether it's with your cultural center or the Heritage Center or, AIPA, business, right? So just putting that up there. Oh, and Don has something.
Sorry, I was looking for the raise hand icon and I couldn't find it. One thing I wanted to add is just something I did when I was in graduate school at UAF is that when you're in college or in graduate school, there are different sources of funding that you can apply for. So that can also help it make it more feasible for you to apply for an internship or a fellowship or an informal opportunity because you can use that funding along with the funding that your location offers. And then the other thing I did at UAF was that you can actually create independent studies. So what I did is I created independent studies so that I could work with staff at the University of the Museum of the North then. And so I basically got on the job training working at a museum by creating an independent study that substituted for like a 3-point or 4-point class, and just did the work and learned directly from someone who, you know, I was actually helpful. I'd like to point out, but it was great on the job work experience. So there's more flexibility than you think. And no one ever told me that you could create an independent study when you're in college or in graduate school. But somehow I figured that out, and it was a total game changer for me. So by the time I graduated, I had experience doing like 3 or 4 different jobs at the museum, because the Museum of the North was just so accommodating and helpful for that. So I just wanted to share that tip. And I'm sure the same thing is at any university, if it's at APU or UAA or UAS, wherever you are. And then, you know, that can also help in lieu of, let's say, having a full-time job payment. If it's something you can do as part of your coursework, then it makes it a lot more feasible for you to consider it as something you can manage, you know, in the busy life of a student. So.
I'm glad you said that, Dawn, because I completely forgot. We do have a relationship with UAA and with the history department and the education department, and they do that. It's an official class, and then they get placed here. But my relationship is with the history department, not the education. And there is funding for UAA students doing history or history related items. And that is a very broad word. I would use it in the broadest sense and not focus it down. But we haven't figured out how to pursue that and to see about, but if you know of any UAA students, it would be a good path to go down, because that there is that relationship and there's funding between the Anchorage Museum and there's an endowment, frankly. So we're exploring that and what that might look like to have regular interns from UAA. We already have the coursework. And so just trying to find students who might be able to work on projects. And similar to what Dawn said, is they have an interest in something that they want to look into and get experience in, and then pitching that to UAA, as well as then getting a placement here at the Anchorage Museum.
That's great. I love these options. So many different ways you could be trained.